In preparation for this conversation about Houston and Texas A&M, you just said this one will be the rock fight of rock fights. Are you looking forward to this game, Brian Rauf?
I'm looking forward to seeing the result and how it plays out, but the actual basketball itself might be a little bit ugly with a lot of bricks.
Maybe. A little harsh to a Texas A&M team that I do enjoy watching on the offensive end. They just don't make shots. That's the problem.
That's the name of the game, though. They play a brand of physical basketball, and if you enjoy physical basketball, this is going to be a game for you. But there's going to be a lot of rebounds.
Yes, that there is. Houston historically under Kelvin Sampson obviously has been one of the most physical teams in the country. They win games by brutalizing you, for lack of a better word. Like you don't go into a game and come away being the tougher team than Houston. And if you try to, that's normally a recipe for disaster. You need to beat them in other ways. Texas A&M is going to try to do that. Like that is how Texas A&M wins games. Do you think they have any chance of actually doing it?
I think they have some chance, right? And it's just a matter of how good do we think Houston is, because I think we all think Houston's a top 5, top 10 team in the country based on everything that's happened throughout Kelvin Sampson's tenure there, the way they've been the last couple of years. But this year's team in particular, there's not a lot of data to back that up because they haven't really played anybody, right? The best teams they've played are Xavier and Dayton, two solid teams, but nobody where you can unequivocally stamp a win over them as, yeah, okay, we know you're a great team now. Like the idea of Houston being this top 5 team is largely still a thought, and taking what we've seen from them against lesser competition against bitter competition. And Texas A&M on paper is not on the same level as Houston is, but they are probably the best team that Houston has played this season. So in a world where Houston has a down game or maybe is not the team we all think they are, this is a chance for Texas A&M to exploit that. Because keep in mind, Xavier almost beat Houston. Like that game was in the balance for a majority of the game. If Houston is not the team we think they are, then this could be a game.
Yeah, if I want to be real careful with how I say this about Houston, because I'm never going to disrespect the Kelvin Sampson team too much. Like I'm always going to be a believer in it. As long as Kelvin Sampson has a guard that I believe in, I love how he coaches and I love the way he tries to win basketball games. His front courts are always going to be fine. They're going to be tough. He's going to have physical defenders. The defenses are going to be elite. He just needs like shot makers that can complement that. And I think this team has that in LJ Cryer. I really like Cryer. I think, sorry, I almost said Sasser. Jamal Shed has not been what we hoped he would be this season. And that scares me a little bit. But, if you look at Houston's resume thus far, they've played 2 top 50 opponents, according to KenPom. Both of those games were close games. Like Utah, they ended up winning by 10, but that was a tie game with about 6 minutes left in that game. Xavier, you're right, was a complete toss-up with just a few minutes left to play. And with no disrespect to Utah or Xavier, I don't think either of those teams are very good. Like you could tell me that those teams end up missing the NCAA tournament. I wouldn't be shocked at the end of the year. Utah, I'd be more surprised than Xavier for sure. But I guess it's hard to. I don't like playing the schedule game in December because it's like teams can't control who's on their schedule once the season starts. Like all they can do is take care of business, and Houston has done that. With that said, this is a way tougher game than anything they've played. And I don't think that's true for A&M. Like A&M has had a very difficult schedule. They've played Iowa State on a neutral where they were missing 2 of their 3 best players. They were down 21 points in that game and came back to get a victory. They played Florida Atlantic on a neutral. And as much as we can, make jokes about how Texas A&M is one of the worst shooting teams in the country, they put up 89 points against Florida Atlantic and hung in a game where Florida Atlantic was making shots. So, and it wasn't just those 2 games, man. Like Ohio State looks really good right now. They went into Columbus and beat Ohio State. Memphis looks like they're a legitimate team. And, the loss to Memphis wasn't great, but they're not going to be afraid of this Houston team. And I think that's more you can say than you can for most Houston opponents.
Correct. And it's not to knock Houston. I don't mean this in a negative way. I'm not saying that they aren't the team that we think they are. We just don't know, right? And Texas A&M is a team with the way they play where if Houston is not the level we think they are, this is going to be a problem. It's probably going to be a game anyway because A&M is battle tested, like you said, and they play the same style or a similar style, which certainly goes in Houston's favor. I think Houston has probably the number 2 and number 3 guys in this game. Wade Taylor, I would say, is the best for A&M, which certainly goes in the Aggies' favor. But having Shed and Cryer in there works it like Houston has the backcourt advantage overall. But I don't know if the gap is as wide as maybe it's made out to be, or people may assume it is just looking at these two teams. Houston is going to have to play at a high level to win this game. Houston, to be fair, has not always played at a high level this season. They have not had to. They have not been tested in this way. Should they still beat Texas A&M? Absolutely. But again, this is a scenario of we think we know this about a team, but just based on the way their schedule has played out this far, we don't know that yet. And so that's the intrigue to me in this game is more so about Houston than A&M. We know what A&M is. If they lose this game, I don't think it's going to change the way we look at A&M that much. But how Houston performs and the outcome of this game will affect how we look at Houston much more, I think.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, no outcome from this is going to make me be like, oh, I'm out on Texas A&M. I really love this team. I think they are, in a lot of ways, like a variation of Houston. Like, obviously, they do play similar styles, but I think Texas A&M is closer to what I want Houston to be than Houston is. Like,
okay.
I because of Wade Taylor, like your point about they have the guy in the backcourt. That's my whole thing with teams like this that do it defensively and beat you up on the boards is who's the guard you have. And at the end of the day, I'm taking Wade Taylor over LJ Cryer when you get in single elimination game settings. Now, look, Houston's defense is a lot better than Texas A&M's. I don't mean to compare those like they're 1-for-1. Houston is the best defense in the country. Texas A&M is a good, not great defense. But the physicality stuff, like, I think is a big part of why Houston is so good defensively, and A&M's not going to get out physical in this game. They're not going to back down from that challenge. So I think these two teams will look more similar when they actually get out on the court than we're expecting. And if there is one thing I think could just swing the game fully in Houston's favor, it's got to just be shooting. We keep alluding to it, but Houston it makes 35% of their shots from three. A&M only makes 28% from three as a team. Houston's three-point defense is nearly elite. Texas A&M's three-point defense has been really poor this season. So, like, that's on the profiles. That's the one thing I'm circling of, like, Houston major advantage. What does Texas A&M need to do from the three-point line for you to believe they can win this game?
Probably that 35% number. I think, to me, make it relatively even, take that advantage away for Houston. Houston is going to be focused on defense the way they always are and always have been in this team too. But this team, I think, is more like the Final Four team. Not that they're going to do that, but from the standpoint of they have a stable of guards who can beat you from deep too. Right. We thought last year's team had that, and they did it, but it ebbed and flowed. And this year's team may ebb and flow too, but Shed and Cryer are capable of winning a game offensively. Houston doesn't want to rely on that, but they're capable of that. If Texas A&M can mitigate that aspect of things, it brings Houston's ceiling down and probably down to A&M's level, to where we see a game that it's probably going to be in the 50s, maybe decided by a possession or two, and that's where you hope so having somebody like Wade Taylor can be a difference late in games.
Yeah, it could happen. If it goes full rock fight, I think that benefits Texas A&M because that means Houston's not making threes. So we'll see if we get there. I'm gonna go a little bold as we get into our predictions here, Brian. I don't think Houston's a top 10 team in the country. I don't. Carter and I did our overrated, underrated segment yesterday, and Carter was going through it, and he ended up naming 11 teams he thought were top 10 teams. And I was like, let's run this back real quick. And the one he eliminated was Houston, who I'm like, dude, they're number one on KenPom. But the more I thought about it last night, I really do think a big reason why they're up at the top in everybody's eyes right now is just who they've played. I think this is going to be a wake-up call. I'm not worried about A&M getting physically dominated in this game. I think A&M has the better guard. I think you can argue they have the better backcourt, depending on how Tyrese Radford looks. But for me, this is a team that won 15 games in the SEC last year that is going to view this as a big game, a resume game. They've been alternating wins and losses for weeks now. They're due for the win off the Memphis loss. Give me A&M on the money line to win the game, and I think over the next couple of weeks we see Houston kind of fall out of favor in the public eye a little bit.
Yeah, I think the A&M money line is probably the value play here. I expect this to be a close game, again, decided by maybe 2 or 3 possessions. I'm still going to take Houston, but I think I'm going to leave this at the same feeling I have about Houston as I did after the Xavier game, where it's like, all right, they won, but I'm still kind of iffy in terms of where they fall among the nation's best teams.
I will say I wish this game was just a true home game for one of these teams. It's a neutral site game in Texas at the Toyota Center in Houston. Just play it at Houston,
Play it
right?
on campus.
Yeah.
Play it at the Fertitta Center. Like, you're going to get a better atmosphere that way.
Come on.
I think.
I would have loved that, and it probably would have swung my pick in this game. So, all right, this will definitely be one to note to come back to. We will have a recap for this game up later this weekend. That's Brian Rauf from Heat Check. I'm Greg Waddell from Sleepers Media. We will see you then.